Welcome everyone to What's Your Story. I'm your host Emmanuel Mutui, and today I have an amazing guest. So right now in this generation, it's all about women empowerment, and you hear women who call themselves their boss babes, their boss B-I-T-C-H, I can't say the word. You hear that a lot, but a lot of them, they're just talking, they're not really doing it. My guest today, she does it. She is an actual boss babe, a boss B-I-T-C-H, and she runs this stuff. Like, she's legitimately that. There's no like faking. She's all that from the day you meet her to the day that you last see her again. She's that. And I've been waiting for this interview for a long time, and because this is the kind of behind the scenes of how she became the boss babe that she is. And so without further ado, Kristen Sharpe.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, I know. I've been waiting for this for a while. Your husband's was good, but this is the one that's better.
It's the icing on the cake.
Yeah,
It's the
yes,
cherry
it
on
is.
top.
Yes, it is. So we'll just start from the beginning.
Okay.
Where are you from?
I'm from San Diego, California, born and raised. I literally lived in the same house my entire life up
Wow.
until I moved out here to Colorado Springs, minus, which we'll get into in a second, that time that I was in an abusive relationship. But
Yeah.
that was a very small window
Wow.
compared to my entire life of living in my same childhood home.
Yeah.
And
What does that do to you? What kind of because that's just stability. You like
Right.
you know, you have a home you have a home the next day. Nothing's gonna change. What kind of confidence did you get from that stability?
I think the right way to pose that question is how did that experience make me who I am?
Boss babe, I told you.
I think that to me is the best way
Okay.
to picture that because it did give me confidence.
Yeah.
It taught me so much about relationships. So I
Okay.
grew up witnessing domestic violence in my home. And I told myself I would never get into an abusive relationship. I did pageants. I competed. I literally paid my way through college through scholarships and pageants.
Really?
I did. Yep.
Huh.
And so I had that confidence, and it helped me become the woman that I am
Yeah.
today. But it was the experiences witnessing domestic violence, then getting into a unhealthy relationship and pageants and all of those things.
Yeah.
That stability allowed me to appreciate the hustle that my parents taught me.
Okay.
And really just the work ethic of doing your best at all costs.
Yeah. So let's talk about pageants, because obviously I know that you won Miss San Diego, and so I am illiterate when it comes to pageantry.
Okay.
All I know is what you see in the movies, like
Sure.
the moms just like conniving, this congeniality where someone's gonna blow. Like that's my understanding of that world. What would you say is the positive of pageantry and the negative of pageantry?
I think the positive for pageantry for me is I was incredibly shy growing up. Like I was the kid who held onto my mom's belt loop and literally hid behind her and didn't want to talk to people. I literally didn't even want to talk to my own family because it was that bad. And I remember I was in high school and I saw a flyer for the Miss San Diego pageant, and it was through the Miss America system. And I saw the flyer and it said, win scholarships for college. And I told my mom that I signed up for the pageant. And she goes, well, what's your talent? And as you know, I'm a hula dancer.
Yes,
and I've
yes.
been dancing since I was 3 years old. And I said, well, I'm a dancer. And she goes, oh, that is a talent. So I ended up entering into the pageant, never done it before. A lot of the other girls had been in pageants, had the big fancy dresses. I had a $50 dress from a little local spot, barely had sparkles on it, was just a plain Jane dress, and I won. And I kept competing in pageants, and I won a lot of them. I didn't win all of them, just for the record, but I won a lot of them.
You won most of them.
I won a lot of them. But pageants, I think the positive side is you create community. And I think that was my first understanding of like sisterhood, that you got to meet all these women from literally all over the world and all over the country and all over your state and region, and create that sort of friendship. I never had sisters. So having that pageant sister was a really special experience. I got to learn how to public speak. So the woman that I am today, I learned how to speak like this because of long hours of coaching and training and being in front of rooms of people that I didn't know, and just taught me how to be the speaker that I am today. all of the skills that I feel like I gained as a young woman helped me become the woman that I am today. Wow. The negative side is, I mean, it's competitive. And for me, I'm very competitive.
I know.
I'm very competitive, for the record. But I mean, there really isn't negative. Like the things you see on TV, in my opinion, it's this facade of what they think pageants are, like toddlers and tiaras. I mean, that really happens, like the pageants that happen for little kids. I mean, the kids don't know what they're doing, and the parents are like, I'm gonna put them in makeup and hair and fake eyelashes. That wasn't me. It was my choice to be in pageants. And for a lot of the pageants that I seen growing up for younger girls weren't that. It was these young ladies or young girls were wanting to have fun and meet friends and get to learn how to talk in front of people. So it depends on who's asking, but to me, there really isn't a lot negative stuff for pageants.
So you're in high school at this point when you're doing all these pageants.
Yep.
And at this point, what did you want to do? Did the pageantry shift your passion or vision for life, or was it always the same?
No, I think it changed over time. Like as a kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Oh, okay.
Very different.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And then I found out how much schooling I had to go to, and I was like, no, thank you. Shout out to veterinarians who are watching. And then when I got into pageants, my pageant coach was like, oh, you should get into commercial real estate. Random. I was 16, but she was like, that's where the money's at. You should do it. So for my interviews and stuff like that, I would tell people that I wanted to get into business or commercial real estate or something in that nature. Okay. And then as I got into college and was competing in pageants, I found my love for speaking and journalism. So I graduated with a degree in journalism and an emphasis in media studies.
Wow. And that was just because the way I know you, you're all about truth, you're all about empowerment, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So you compete in this pageantry and they kind of shape your vision or reshape your vision for what you want to do. How would you say your home is at this point? Because like you mentioned earlier, you came from an abusive home.
It's funny, but not funny. You know, we went to church on Sundays, and growing up in the church, you really didn't talk about what happened to you. I also went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade.
Wow, okay.
And my parents wanted to put me in an all-girls Catholic school for high school. And I was like, no, thank you. But my parents did their best with what they had.
Okay.
And I can only appreciate that because, you know, as parents now, I can only do what I know or what I've been taught or what I see from my peers. Mm-hmm. So going to pageants, my parents were always supportive. They traveled with me all across the state of California, going up and down to events every weekend, multiple times a day. It was a real thing. It was multiple. Like I was the mayor of San Diego. I had to go to multiple appearances and shake hands, kiss babies, do emceeing at different festivals and the parades and the whole thing. My parents were always supportive and they were my number one and still are my number one supporters.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful that they did their best with what they had.
Okay. So then let's get into the relationship. How old were you when you started dating that gentleman?
Not a gentleman, but person.
Yep.
So I didn't realize until much later in life that my first relationship was also unhealthy. He didn't physically abuse me, but he was jealous and manipulative, and emotionally abusive. But then I didn't consider that a teen dating violence relationship until I got into that relationship. Okay. That was every form of abuse, from physical to emotional to financial to sexual. Wow. It was rough. And the relationship started off great, like most relationships do, the honeymoon phase. And then he started becoming more manipulative and it became scary. So I didn't know, how to get out of that situation. And I thought, well, all relationships are difficult. I mean, look at my parents. They have gone through the ringer and back and they're still great. And so confiding into friends about what was happening, it didn't make sense to them because they were also in healthy relationships. Wow. So to me, like getting into that relationship, and as it got deeper and deeper into an unhealthy relationship, I just started drowning and not understanding or or seeing what was healthy or what was not healthy. And at one point, I had to realize, well, it's either I'm going to take my own life or he's going to take my life. So there was a lot of terrible things that happened in that relationship. That's why I decided to speak out and share my story, because I know that there are so many people that also suffer from it.
So before we even get to the power that you came out of that relationship with, what were some of the red flags that you saw and ignored, or you just didn't know there were red flags that you would like to share to people?
Constantly checking my phone. Who are you with? What are you wearing? Who are you with? It was like a constant cycle of just the questions and the manipulation and the fear tactics. It was, if you leave my house and I'm not ready for you to leave my house, I'm going to hurt myself and make it look like you did it. Or stalking me, literally calling me while I was at home saying, hey, I can see you in your driveway right now. And I'm looking up and down my street like, what do you mean you can see me? And he's like, yeah, you're wearing this and your mom's standing right next to you. And I'm like, where are you? He's like, don't worry about it. Like, I see you and I'm always watching you. And he would say things like that. So the manipulation, the isolation, the rape, the controlling my body, or telling me, that I was worthless, that no one was going to love me. And all of that emotional and mental abuse literally took a toll on my self-esteem. Wow. The girl who did the pageants got into a relationship like this. And although I won all of these things, going through something so tragic as that, I'm like, well, I guess that is true then. I guess I am ugly. I guess I am fat. I guess I am worthless. I guess no one else will love me. Wow. And taking that and turning that into something with purpose was really hard to do. But I knew that there were so many people out there in the world that also suffered from that.
So how were you coping? How long was this relationship first?
3 years.
3 years. How were you coping during this time?
In that relationship?
Yes.
I wasn't. It was like constant survival mode. If you ever felt, or if you can just imagine walking on eggshells, literally getting a carton of eggs, cracking them, and literally walking across the floor, and or even nails, walking across a floor of nails and not knowing if one of them was going to stick you or not. That's literally what it felt like. Is he going to come home? Is he going to be angry? Is he going to be mad because of, literally one of the situations was I drank juice out of the refrigerator, and he's like, why did you drink my juice? And threw the juice container at me. Or when I was like, I'm getting ready to leave, I'm going to pack up my stuff, I'm going to put it by the door and then try to get this out. It was just me trying to get all my stuff and leave whatever else I can there. He came home sooner than I expected and literally took my stuff and started shattering it like, you're not going anywhere. So that sense of fear is what keeps people in those relationships. So,
what gave you the confidence to leave?
God.
Walk me through that.
I remember the last situation, he literally bit my arm where my tattoo now is, and he literally punctured my skin and literally was holding on to my freaking skin. And keep in mind, there were other terrible things that happened that were way worse than that. But I remember seeing a big bruise on my arm. And I literally heard God's voice saying, if you stay in this relationship, your life is going to continue spiraling out of control. And literally that was my opportunity, my calling, my sign from God Almighty that, okay, go. Yeah. So I literally told my mom what was happening to me. She kind of had an idea that I was in some sort of probably a not good relationship. She didn't like him. My dad didn't like him, but I didn't care. But I told her what happened. I remember sitting on my bed and telling her, hey, I've got to tell you something. And she started listing all these different things. Oh, are you pregnant? Are you this? Are you that? Or whatever, all these things. And I'm like, I'm in a really abusive relationship. I need to get out. And she was like, well, let's get you a restraining order. And so I got a restraining order and was approved. And literally 11 days after I got that restraining order, I created my organization.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what gave you the confidence? Because it's one thing to get out, but it's another thing now to publicly share your story. What gave you the confidence to do that?
I, again, have to say God, because the fear that literally lived inside of my body, the crippling anxiety, the torment. I mean, could you imagine someone speaking out against the things that you did? And he was a I don't want to say a public figure, but someone that people knew in the community. And so for me, I don't know, I just knew that someone had to hear my story. I started off by sharing poetry and just things about abuse and facts and things like that. And 6 months later, I actually shared my restraining order on Facebook and let the world read it. And that same month, I filed to become a nonprofit and was approved in a very quick time and literally started offering services for other people that were just like me.
Wow. So I want to ask this because from public speaking, granted you've been doing it for a while, so at that point probably not as bad, but you've take me back to your first public address, sharing your story.
Oh my gosh.
How was that? I want to hear the train wreck or the success rate.
It was a train wreck. You know, when you share something so personal, like you feel it, like I even feel it now, like my very first event was at my church.
Okay.
And it was mainly family and friends, but just like immediate people that had supported the organization or this idea of me creating this thing. And I just cried the entire time.
Wow.
I cried the entire time. And honestly, I cried many times doing my public address to people for probably the first few years, honestly, because it was so raw. It was, I literally saw a picture that came up on my Facebook memories recently. And I remember that day. I remember it so vividly because I was speaking at a woman's vigil, a domestic violence vigil, because a woman was killed on campus at this college in San Diego. And they asked me to share my story. And so not only am I sharing my story, I'm literally sharing it at the place where this woman was killed. Oh, wow. And so I'm trembling inside. And for me, like I had a lot of survivor's guilt because I'm like, well, why me? And all of these women were being killed and they were the same age as I was when I had left that situation. And it was just weird how God just put these families into my life that their loved ones were killed at 22. I left at 22. And I mean, many of the speaking engagements thereafter, it was just trembling, but the trembling got less and less and the confidence became more and more. And when I heard people in the room who were like, hey, I need to hear your story, or your story reminded me of mine, or your story reminded me of this person or that person, I knew that I had to keep going. And that fear had to take a back seat because other people needed me more than fear did. So I just kept sharing my story, and that's what I did and keep doing.
Let's talk about your organization, because I did not realize how successful it became. Just give us the highlights of where you went from an abused 22-year-old girl to this big nonprofit.
So first of all, I had no idea what I was doing. And, you know, I grew up with nonprofits. I grew up volunteering, giving back, raising money, but nothing like this. And so I literally created a nonprofit, self-funded it for the first few years of the organization. But I built it on Facebook. I literally built the organization online, which was completely different from any other domestic violence nonprofit that there was at the time. And I was helping people online. I was literally taking phone calls all day, every day, all hours of the day. I was the advocate. I was the program coordinator. I was the executive director, the fundraiser, all of the things. And I would work literally 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like it was, if you thought I worked a lot now, that was a whole different thing. Because I had so much passion for it. And I knew that there were so many people that were struggling with it. Every 90 seconds, someone falls victim to abuse.
What?
So literally during this interview, there are going to be dozens of people who would fall victim somewhere in the country. So bullet points of the success. Literally 2013 was our first year that we offered services. 2014, we quadrupled the amount of support we were able to offer. 2015, as you can see, I've said this a few times. 2015, I was featured in Glamour magazine, ESPN, Investigation Discovery. And, you know, the rest was history. Like, I was raising a lot of money online. During the pandemic, we raised over $250,000 just on Facebook alone. And the organization is still raising money on autopilot based upon the systems that I built when I was there.
So, and this is the part that I share what you can, because I know you don't talk much about this part, but and this is more of like the business side of things. When a lot of people, because in the churches you see, actually our pastor here started a church, the board of directors told him he can leave. And you see that with Steve Jobs happened to him, and some similar happened to you. What would you share just on the business side of things, when people start an organization, they're the ones who are passionate, they put all of the hard work, they build it to this thing, people come and you think they're there to help you, and then before you know it, you're like, oh.
Things change.
Yeah.
Well, in early 2020, before the pandemic was even a thing, God was calling me out of my nonprofit. And I was like, what do you mean? This was my baby. What's going on? What do you mean by that? But it was clear that, my calling was much greater than domestic violence. And so I wanted to spread my wings. I didn't even know what that meant, quite honestly. But I knew that I was meant for more than just DV. I didn't want to be just the girl who broke her silence. I didn't want to be just the girl who went through something really traumatic.
Okay.
And so I transitioned out of my nonprofit in 2020. And what I learned from that experience was, and what I tell people all the time is that your work is not your identity. And sometimes I still struggle with that because I built something so successful, and starting from the proverbial scratch with my new businesses, it's hard. It feels hard, and sometimes it hurts. But I know that with growth comes change, comes transformation. Looking at where I was with my nonprofit and seeing where I'm at now, it's two completely different lives.
Okay.
And it's a blessing, and it has taught me so much.
Yeah.
And it's a teaching lesson for other people that I get to work with through nonprofit consulting, because that's another hat that I wear. Is being able to teach people how to build a sustainable nonprofit, how to create change, how to be able to use your story for something great, but then also know that you are not defined by just that story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That would be my best answer for that.
Okay. Hey, thank you for that. So in the middle of this success with the nonprofit, you meet your current husband. And we don't have to share much because he shared his story and some of your guys' story. What would you say, if going back into healthy and abusive relationships, what would be the things that Terry Josiah has just been able to fill for you, cover for you, compared to the previous one?
Oh my gosh, it's literally, it can't even say it's night and day. It's like night and a whole new universe. Well, I actually met my husband like early on when creating the organization. So it was still fresh. Created the organization technically in 2011. It became a nonprofit in July of 2012. I met him in October of 2012.
Okay.
So he attended my very first charity gala, and I hadn't introduced him to my parents yet. And he showed up with JJ. And he was
JJ's his brother.
Yeah. JJ's my brother-in-law. Shout out, Jay. But he was there, and I gave him a hug, and it didn't seem like a regular hug to my parents. And so they're like, who's this guy? And I was like, I was meaning to tell you, this is my new boyfriend. And, my dad was very skeptical about that because now he knew what I went through. And so even till this day, he's still my husband's a great person.
Yeah.
But, my dad is very protective, and he's like, well, are you okay? Are you good? Are you this? Are you that? Are you, and the constant questions, let me know if you're okay. And I'm like, I'm good. But the biggest difference is from the very beginning, he was so supportive. And I'm not talking about just my business, but I literally had a freaking panic attack at his house. And I remember this because it was one of those shattering all my limiting beliefs of relationships that all guys were bad. But I literally found myself in literally a fetal position in his room and literally crying. And I didn't know what was happening. And I literally just was sobbing. And instead of him asking me to stop crying or telling me to stop crying or what's wrong or what do you need or any of those things, he literally just rubbed my back. And I will never forget that, because to me, for someone who's gone through something traumatic, you don't always want someone to ask you, hey, are you okay? And you're like, I'm losing my biscuits. But number one, he was there for me from the beginning, and he understood me from the beginning. And I think what was really special was his trauma growing up with DV, but then also going to war, he was like, wow, I didn't realize how many similarities like domestic violence victims and veterans have. And while that's a really bold statement to have, it literally feels like victims of abuse are at war at home. And so that understanding allowed us to kind of create this relationship where we need to communicate. If something's going wrong, we need to talk about it. If you're not happy about something, we got to talk about it. So we always said from the very beginning, we're going to talk about it even if it's uncomfortable. And so that communication, the boundaries, we didn't have boundaries in our last relationships. We didn't have, a trusting partner that we could lean on. These are all things that he was able to do for me from the very beginning.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously through his story, we know, and our viewers know, if you watch the interview, the Lord brought you out here to Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met him, like I've already shared, I didn't know about you at the time, and he was like this big shot, in studio music. And you were, to me at the time, just this nice wife who's just supporting her man, just doing what she has to do.
I am.
Yeah. But not only are you doing that, but I learned you got your own stuff too, which is just as big. And when I learned that, I think it was at my engagement, I learned that and I was just like, okay, I had no idea. So when you moved here, just share some of the things that you do now.
So when I transitioned out of my nonprofit, decided to go big because I wasn't going home. I started multiple businesses, Boss Babe Networking and the nonprofit Makeover. And so both of those companies were really a representation of the business that I created with my nonprofit. So I was able to continue serving nonprofits and more specifically nonprofit leaders of color. Because there's not a lot of us. There's not a lot of successful nonprofit leaders of color who are raising money on autopilot and doing it through social media. I honestly can't tell you very many that are doing it. So I wanted to be able to break that barrier for entrepreneurs. And then of course, Boss Babe Networking, which will forever have my heart because I get to empower women in business.
Yeah.
And those two things have grown tremendously. I created them during the pandemic. And now I have the honor of working with dozens of different women all across the country, helping them with their businesses and their careers.
Wow, that is so awesome.
Yeah.
And so right now, what would you say, because you're a woman of action, boss babe, as you like to refer yourself to, and I call you that from time to time, what would you say is where you're going? What is your vision for Boss Babe? And I'm just blanked out.
The nonprofit Makeover.
Nonprofit, yes.
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that.
Ah, okay.
And quite honestly, I don't even think I've asked myself that question.
Okay, that's fair.
Because if you would have asked me where do I think my nonprofit was going, I knew that answer. And I think that's this is one of those vulnerable moments, that question is going to be replaying in my head all weekend long. Because I knew that one of the things that I believe that I struggle with my current business that I didn't with my nonprofit is I knew where I wanted to go. I knew where my steps were going to be taken and I knew there were going to be challenges along the way. But with this endeavor, it's like, well, anything is possible. Anything and everything is possible. But what does that look like? And so I could just say that in the immediate future, I'm going to be offering a membership program for entrepreneurs, and that's going to give them access to a whole bunch of tools and resources and community. But there's so much potential in what I'm building, and I don't want to limit myself. My biggest goal with my nonprofit was everyone was going to know my name. Every household was going to know my name, and I did a very good job at doing that. And so I can say, okay, checkbox. But for BBN, it's different. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the community that I'm building and the people that I get to serve. So I'll get back to you on that when I figure out that answer.
Okay, I'll take that. So I thank you for that answer, which is very honest, which is all I can ask for. And so as we come to an end here, I want to do like some rapid fire questions just to keep you on your toes to make sure that you're not losing your biscuits.
Okay, I'm ready.
As you said. So question number 1. What would you say if you were speaking to a younger you? What would you say to her?
Oh, that's a good one. Because I asked myself this question for our Boss Babe Academy. It was our teen program that we did this summer, and I actually got really emotional asking myself that question, and I didn't even want to record it because I literally lost my biscuits. Short answer is what I would tell 15-year-old, let's give her a number.
Okay.
15-year-old Kristen is that your body doesn't define you. I thought that if I gave myself, that was how I showed love to people. But you are more than enough. And so that's something I even teach myself as an adult is you are enough. So that would be my answer.
Okay, I love that answer. Question number 2. What would you say is your most, if you can, which is probably hard, and I know it's hard, so answer the best that you can. What was the one point in life where you are at your happiest? You're like, I just can't believe a person can be this happy.
Oh my God. You know what's funny is I was reading a book and the prompt was that same thing, and I was like, well, what is that? You know, I can't. You give me some hard questions. My
I did
God.
say that was hard. I did say that.
I think one of the happiest moments I have to say is my wedding.
Yeah.
Because like it still feels so surreal. But I got to marry my best friend.
Yeah. In Hawaii.
In Hawaii at the most beautiful resort on the island, and we were literally can see the ocean. And with our family and friends and people that cared about us, and it was just a fun experience.
I'll give you an easy question to wrap up.
Thank you.
All right. So for those who don't know, Kristen and I, long time ago, I never let this go and I never will.
I know where this is going. I thought about this driving here.
We had, not just us two, those other people, but
no one else existed.
Yeah, no one else mattered, to be honest. We had a dance off, and it was essentially Hulu dance versus Kenyan dance. Kenyan dance won. And so this is more of a challenge. Since she has her dance studio and all that, I am willing to come down there and we could do a face-off. Is that a challenge that you're willing to accept?
That's cool. Yeah, let's do it.
She said, okay. I like the confidence. Okay, we'll do that. And we'll record it so that they can see me win again. Because the other one is more like stories. People will never know.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. I told you it's going to be
cool. As
easy.
long as you can teach a class. Can you teach that?
You're born with that.
I know. It's
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. I'll think about that.
Okay.
So anyway, before we wrap up, I just want you to share what you're doing right now, like, because you guys have a studio and what the studio is about, so that people can know and they can go out there and book it.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So the other hat that I wear is I also run Anthem Live Studios. We just opened up a multicultural dance studio and event space. And we're already booking events into next year, which is really exciting. But if you're looking for a space to come and unite with the people that you care about, contact Anthem Live Studios. It's a really beautiful space that we built with our bare hands. And you can't appreciate a space more than that, okay? Yeah. So I had the honor of helping the team build the space and build the dance instructors and build the events. And really what it felt like is I built a business in literally 3 months, which is like record timing for me. Usually it's a little bit more time than that, but I literally designed it and figured out the dance instructor piece and all the other business elements of it. Yeah, that's what I'm doing too.
Yeah, I know. She's a boss babe. That's why
I'm a hustler.
She is. That's a very good description. Both of you and your husband, you both of you you're hustlers. Yeah, you came in, created, and all those different things. Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up here, and this is the last thing, and I'll let you go because as you know now, she's a boss babe. What would be a message to the girls? Any girl. I'm not gonna say she's struggling or just a girl who's just trying to make it. What would you tell that girl?
I think the best piece of advice that I would give to any girl watching this is that you can do anything that you put your heart to. Like literally everything that I shared, everything that I talked about my story, like it all took a plan. It all took a vision, and that question that you asked me that literally stumped me is literally a vulnerable moment for you to see that literally I need more planning to know where I want to go. Because that's ultimately how businesses become successful is that plan. So I would say to any girl watching is that you can do anything that you want to do. I don't care what anyone says. No one can stop you. You can do it. All you need is a plan and God, period.
Yep. Well, there you go. I don't need to add anything to that. Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for stopping by. This has been a pleasure for me, and I can't wait to do another one with you and your husband, because I believe both of you are just amazing people.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Remember, we all have a story. What's your story? Goodbye.
Goodbye.
There we go.